Awakening the soul isn't some distant spiritual moment, but something that happens quietly here, right in the middle of your relationships, your desires, and your daily choices. Today's spark is about coming alive from the inside out. Welcome to Soul Sparks. The short conversations are designed to light something meaningful within you. I am Saima, and I am joined today by Louis Brantmeyer, a dating, relating, and mating coach who helps successful professional men create the relationship and intimacy they truly desire, and a guide for heart centered entrepreneurs who want to grow the impact with ease and authenticity. Our topic is a big one, but a very human one: how to awaken the soul, not by escaping life, but by fully engaging with it. So, Louis, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you. Lovely, delightful to be here.
Yeah, we are warmly welcome. I'm glad you're here. So, Louis, when you hear the phrase awakening the soul, what does that mean to you? Not philosophically, but experimentally.
The difficulty there is that I'm a trained philosopher. Uh, I was I was a teacher and a student for long before that, so I'll turn the volume down on that aspect of the answer, even though experimental, I agree, is the most important part. I won't turn it all the way off, though. So the soul is that which we experience that has us nourished in uh, flourishing, thriving in relation to life. And here's what I mean by that. If I touch and feel through whatever in me I've been carrying around trauma wise, or if I cultivate state of high concentration through meditation, and I stick to that process long enough consistently, we know from the great mystical traditions throughout history, something is likely to occur. We know from the Science of Enlightenment by Shinzen Young, science scholar and Buddhist monk. We know from Dr. Jeffrey Martin's studies of the so-called finders, those who have experienced things like this in his program, 45 Days to Awakening, that there is something worth seeking, that this thing transmutes or transfigures our mundane experience of life. There was a philosopher who said, here's how we can summarize this philosopher's life. They said, well, he lives, he thought, and then he died. And, I think there's more to it than that. Well, there's a whole world of experiences that we can have. And the soul is when someone uncovers that potential inside, whether their neurology or their spiritual body, which is, a different angle on the same thing. And yeah, I'm definitely in the interest of awakening the experience of the divine, of love, of truth, of beauty. But I'm also very skeptical and doubtful and careful. The emperor in World War II had people experiencing satori, which is a Zen Buddhist form of awakening of the soul, of wholeness, of freedom. And then he would commission these people. This is based on my awareness. I'm paraphrasing the history, but he would tell them, "Well, now it's time to go commit seppuku by engaging in kamikaze bombings of American aircraft carriers with your planes." And so there's a danger that the reality of awakening the soul is absolutely worth pursuing. But the further context and the ethical sort of sprouts from that is where it becomes interesting. Like, what do we do with that? And how do we know what to do with that? And how do we know whose mystical experiences take precedence or whose soul awakening is the one we should follow? I'm sure you're from India. There are fakirs and yogis who I've even seen on Instagram who are, you know, uh, in one position for long periods of time, even in freezing cold, was the video I saw recently. And like Saima, they're performing miracles or other things. And I've seen Christian teachers on the other side of the globe do similar things. Does does someone experiencing a soul awakening or even bearing fruit from that soul awakening mean they have the truth or the ultimate good or the direction that humanity ought to go in? I don't know, but I'll end this monologue, which I realize is a monologue. I love your next question with a quote from Aleister Crowley, who is somewhat controversial, uh, but who introduced me to the practice of mysticism and meditation. And he says in his Confessions, I admit that my visions can never mean to other people as much as they do to me. I do not regret this. All I ask is that my results should convince seekers after truth that there is beyond doubt something worthwhile seeking, attainable by methods more or less like mine. I do not want to father a flock, to be the fetish of fools and fanatics, or the founder of a faith whose followers are content to echo my opinions. I want each person to cut their own way through the jungle.
That's really powerful, Louis. And I really resonate with how grounded your description is. Like, you're not framing soul awakening as something mystical or distant, but as a field recognition and an inner knowing that there's more to experience, more depth to explore, and that sense of, like I said, something worth seeking. It feels very human and very honest, and it takes awakening out of abstraction and places it firmly in lead curiosity and openness to life, and that's really remarkable, I would say. Now I'm curious, what do people tend to get wrong about soul awakening? Where do we overcomplicate or romanticize it?
Good question. You can attain awakening, and there are 5 levels of consciousness. I can detail and map those out just to give people some orientation. There are at least 5 that I have discerned. Um, but just because someone has a mystical experience does not mean that they are now the infallible purveyor of truth, or that they can't be mistaken, or they can't be unethical, or they can't fall prey to some kind of, um, you know, power hungry megalomania or, um, you know, uh, sexual criminality or whatever. Like these are fairly common in spiritual leaders who have real fruit, who have tasted real things, who are doing their best, even to get the gifts and the fruits of these to people around them. Now, the key is to stay awake at the wheel of the ego. The ego is cunning, crafty, creative, agile, infinitely um, resilient, and also infinitely nasty. Just look at all the wars and all the genocides and all the horrific things that humans do to each other. That facet and feature of human nature is not suddenly or completely eradicated by someone's touching of God, truth, love, enlightenment. It merely becomes held from a different angle. And, there's a phenomenon in my training we talk about, which is transformation for evil. So, transformation is this phenomenon where someone can instantaneously uh, imagine opening your refrigerator door and you see the Grand Canyon instead of what you expected there. Like someone can literally have a dramatically different life in an instant based on their experience of spiritual teachings or, healing processes, some of which I lead people through the paradigm breakthrough therapy method or theta healing or superconscious recodes. And the tricky part is the ego is always seeking its own advantage. It's seeking to defend, control, dominate, manipulate, be right, make others wrong, judge, other, like to turn people into others, to other them, to be like, oh, there's us or me, and then there's them, and they're different, and I'm better, or something like that. So transformation for evil is when the ego wakes up to the power that it could be using transformational work for, such that it sinks its teeth into that training, those tools, those technologies, those techniques in order to advance its own agenda. And one question might be, well, how do you know about this phenomenon? I could say, well, I know it all too well. I would say, ask me how I know. Well, I know it from experiencing it. When I was a younger and less mature coach, teacher, public speaker, I would lead people through things and then I would witness my ego. I would fall asleep at the wheel of my ego and see it use terms like integrity or tools like transformational processes to push people around until I got the distinction and realized how reprehensible that was and realized, oh my gosh, I need to keep people around me who are looking into my blind spots, criticizing whatever awakening I perceive myself to be if it bears the fruits and flowers that are weeds, really. So we always have to stay awake, weeding our garden of our mind, of our character, of our behavior. And there are a lot of cult leaders and good spiritual movements and teachers that come from simply not continuing to be fastidious and rigorous in awareness and in vigilance after the awakening, after the enlightenment.
What you are highlighting is incredibly important and really spoken about so honestly, Louis. I must say, the way you describe transformation is something, that can be shaped either toward healing or toward egoic advantage adds a deeper level of maturity to the conversation and awakening around awakening, like acknowledging that ego can quietly step in even through spiritual language or teaching shows real discernment born from experience. It I feel that it reminds us that soul awakening isn't about power or identity shifts, but about intention and integrity beneath the process, and that's a powerful reminder. Now let's stay with that for a moment. What actually disconnects people from the soul in the first place?
What a great question. So,
Mhm.
there are two processes that have us fall asleep, so to speak. There's domestication and trauma. Domestication is the indoctrination or inculturation, and I say that intentionally, um, that we get from preachers, teachers, family, friends, media, government, academia, the media industrial complex, the military and medical industrial complexes. There are systems of power that uphold and enshrine egos in their authority that are, whether through no, sometimes through fault of their own, but so often not, purveyors of programming that domesticate us the same way we might domesticate dogs. And so we find ourselves pursuing blueprints for what life ought to be about and who we ought to be and what we ought to achieve that won't fulfill us, that weren't built by us, and that don't point us back to our power and our capacity within ourselves to experience peace, love, and joy, regardless of circumstances, happiness independent of conditions, or, power to manifest and create epic lives. I hang out with multimillionaires who manifest $1 million days because of their surrender to spiritual forces and their awareness of the subtleties with which to conduct themselves in relation to these powers. And I wouldn't have believed it. Asked me 10 years ago, the skeptical philosophy teacher who, was a scientific rationalist atheist. I had to be exposed to and have hundreds of experiences with really strange phenomenon, like putting on my vision board a desire for God to give me a partner who's better than I can imagine, and having my childhood adolescent crush from 15 years previously show up into my life in such a way that not only was the event that she got invited to, that I had invited a client of mine to, an answer to her prayers that kept her from suicide, but also it was the fulfillment of a dream I didn't know I could still have, this woman. And that there's so many other stories like that, like unexpected money showing up out of the blue, the exact moment when I need it. And this I ascribe to my surrender to uh, the best of my ability to perceive and currently in integrity with authenticity follow God, source, infinite intelligence, the being behind our awakening experiences, the being contacted and activated or awakened within these spiritual mystical experiences. And like, here's the thing. Uh, the one side is domestication. There are a lot of people who have a lot of interest in us not stepping into or being awake to our full power. And then there's the simple matter and fact of our experience of life. We start out open, free, full of possibility, and covered over by trauma. Experiences, whether big or little t trauma, that leave us thinking we're not safe, we're not good enough, we don't belong, we're not significant, we're not worthy, whatever. The ego, by some theories, even comes to exist as a response to trauma, as a statement to itself that it is not worthy of love and it needs to fix itself, and makes the whole life this sort of snake eating its tail experience of trying to be a different identity, but never being able to settle in that identity. Because if we became that identity, the ego would have to unseat itself from its throne. And our ego is useful. Our ego's not our identity, though. It's really useful for, making sure we don't run into other people in traffic, or helping us, honor our needs for food and water. But the ego is ultimately, if we put it in its right place, it's an instrument for the expression of divine love and purpose and dharma, not the soul and totality of our identity. So, like, we're also not here to fix ourselves. So inside the conversation of domestication comes the awareness of, like, waking up to the so-called matrix, letting go of the blueprint, burning the beliefs that have been enculturated and indoctrinated in us. And then with the awareness of trauma comes this desire to release resistance, to remove and remediate for the blocks and trauma we've taken on through these limiting experiences, or through the meanings, more properly, that our nervous systems and our minds have made of these limiting experiences. And so, the opportunity there is to simply distinguish who we most choose to be, what we most choose to create from our deepest heart, from our truest alignment, from our highest choice, and then let go of the resistance to taking the actions to move us in that direction, not to make our life a perpetual, obsessive, narcissistic, solipsistic, autistic healing journey. Like, it's okay to have healing so long as healing doesn't have you. And I see so many people in spiritual paths, they had their awakening experience and they're still learning, they're still growing. We're here to live a life we love and contribute our heart to the world in service to the upliftment of humanity, not to stick our heads up our butts healing.
Mhm, mhm. The way you hold that distinction is really powerful, Louis. Like naming domestication and trauma with such calm clarity and then placing the ego where it belongs as an, like you said, an instrument rather than an identity carries a lot of depth, honestly. There's a grounded wisdom in how we speak about it without drama or judgment, just a recognition. It feels like an invitation to see ourselves more honestly and more gently at the same time, and the clarity in how you speak invites people to pause and really feel what's being pointed to rather than analyze it. Now, as we enter this, how does soul disconnection or awakening show up in relationships, intimacy, or how we show up with others?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, there's a lot, right? So the way in which we take our desires to be us may itself be in question. And here's what I mean by that. People may pursue, for example, sexual and relational needs, not realizing that these perceived needs are inflected or contaminated by unmet emotional and spiritual needs. It's okay to have sex, love, connection, relationship, so long as it doesn't have you. How do you know when it has you? Well, when you can't be without it and experience peace, love, and joy without it. So that's a clear litmus test for if someone is off balance in the moment in their current pursuit of one or other of these desires. And the energy with which we create a thing is the energy with which it will be experienced. Just like, the energy with which I create a piece of content. I talk about the art on my wall and I say it's crystallized inspiration. At the moment of its creation, there was a certain vibration, intention, energy, psychological state, even if you want to go full on empiricist, that the creator was carrying, and that they then embedded into the artwork that we get to access. In the same way, the actions that I take, if I take them from fear, scarcity, and a perceived need, w well, I mean, like, instead of taking them from freedom and overflow and joy, the results of those actions, because you always reap what you sow, may be relationships and, sexual experiences, people who end up giving me more of where I was coming from. As one of my spiritual teachers says, you don't get what you're looking for, you get where you're looking from." And if I'm looking from scarcity, if I'm looking from fear, if I'm operating from seeking to meet sexual and romantic needs, not realizing that really what I need to meet are spiritual and emotional needs, well, then it's not going to work. It's going to be dysfunctional, codependent, dysregulated. It's going to, you look at modern relationships, and I think God is missing. God is missing, and co-empowerment is missing. So full fledged commitment to doing one's dharma and giving one's gifts and serving one's purpose. If one did that, one wouldn't be codependently looking to their partner to regulate them or to make them happy. It would be a nice bonus to a life already lived from peace, love, joy, and thriving. And if we had God as an embodied, embedded, direct, visceral, palpable, real experience, and I've been surrounded by too many people who live with that and live from that, to doubt it anymore, that it's something someone can actually access and activate. I call it the love that never leaves in my church, which is funnily enough different than my spiritual community where we question the meaning of all these things. I allow my philosopher to come out. It's called the Mystic Crew, and there's video recordings of that on my YouTube channel. But you know, the thing about all this is we if we go to God first, if we go within first, we won't be without when we go without. Because most people are trying to solve an internal problem with an external solution. Like, oh, I feel unloved. Let me get a partner. Let me create sex. Let me create dates. Let me create a relationship. Well, okay. The thing that you can guarantee is if you're trying to fill a hole or void or a wound with someone else, they're eventually not going to show up on time in the way that you expect or desire or attach to. It's inevitable. They're human. And then it's gonna hurt worse because they're gonna rip their hand out of the wound that they were filling for you, and and your expectations are gonna get violated, and here's the thing, you can never have a broken heart. We talk about heartbreak, right? Uh, your heart never actually breaks physically or energetically, but what actually breaks is your expectations, and when your expectations break, you can use that opportunity to move closer to your heart or to go farther away. And so what I invite people to do is to go closer to their heart whenever their expectations are violated and to reach deeper, to see more, to find more in life and get present to and become aware of that love that never leaves, which I have a regular event called Awaken Relentless Love in Partnerships. You can go to awakenrelentlesslove.com where I can help people to actually experience this, to do experiments where they try on some of these methods and these modalities and have their relationships, their sense of self, their experience of life revivified, reawakened, and transformed, transfigured.
Mm-hmm. The way you express that feels both grounded and piercingly honest, Lois. Like saying that love is beautiful until it becomes something we can't live without draws a powerful line between devotion and dependence. And what you shared about something sacred being missing in modern relationship really lingers, and I completely agree with that perspective. It speaks to a deeper hunger for meaning, reverence, and presence that often gets replaced with attachment or expectation, like you explained. And there's a depth in how you hold love as something expansive rather than possessive, and it invites a very different way of relating to one another. And the way you put that is really remarkable. So, Louis, thank you for sharing this spark with us on Soul Sparks. And listeners, take a moment today to notice what brings you alive, even quietly. Until next time, stay open, stay curious, and let your soul lead.